Þó mig gigtin þjái grimm og þunnan ber ég lokkin sé það við árin 75. Sitt ég enn við rokkin.
The evocative voice there of Icelandic folk singer and composer Bára Grímsdóttir. And when you're in Iceland and you start talking about music and women, Bára's name comes up immediately. She grew up on a rural dairy farm, hearing the songs and the singing styles she's now made her life's work. She's a special interest in rimur, a rhyming chanted song style, and she's someone who has worked to preserve and collect the folk singing traditions of Iceland. I'm Helen Shaw, and this is Mother's Blood, Sister's Songs, the story of how the genetics of Iceland reveals its Gaelic roots. Now in Reykjavik, composer Linda Buckley and I sat down with Bára and her English-born husband Chris Foster, who form a folk group, FUNI, to talk about their work and the story behind Iceland's folk song.
I'm Bára Grímsdóttir. I'm a composer and I'm a traditional singer and do other stuff also, like a choir conductor. And a chairman of a society called Kvæðamannafélag Iðunn, which is a society who have collected lots of traditional tunes.
I'm Chris Foster and I'm resident in Iceland, but I'm from England, and I'm a folk musician of many years and also work as a visual artist, but I work a lot with Bára on Icelandic music, and we also do some British traditional music as well.
Mm. So I might just start actually with you, Bára, because I think we have some similarities in that we both were connected to dairy farms and singing traditions. And maybe could you tell me a little bit about your upbringing and your connection to song as a child?
I heard my grandfather sing often traditional tunes, and my grandmother also. But it was so funny often with my grandfather. When he had a conversation with people, he often spoke like a poems, and sometimes he started to sing the poems. So he always could find, he knew loads of these little verses, you know, and he always could come with one in each kind of conversation about different subjects. When we moved to Reykjavik, my father, he and his brother, they were often asked to sing together traditional songs from their, you know, from the area where he grew up in Vatnsdalur in north of Iceland. And they used to practice at home because my uncle's wives, he didn't like this kind of music. So, and my mother, she was also a traditional singer.
And did you learn from hearing it around the place, or did you actually decide very consciously, I'm going to sit down and learn these songs, or was it just very much from something that was in the air?
Yeah, it was basically like that. I just learned the tunes, and it was not what I decided to learn. It's just, you know, I swallowed this music, and it's like, yeah, drank it with my mother's, what do you call it?
Milk.
And what brought you to Icelandic folk music?
Well, Bára did, but there was sort of a story behind that, because I'd been involved in traditional music making from a teenager. And it was about 20 years ago, I was working on a project in the southwest of England connected with a big collection of folk songs made by a man called Sabine Baring-Gould. He was in the 19th century. We decided it would be good to get some musicians from Iceland, especially because nobody involved in our project, and we'd been around and been travelling and doing gigs all over Europe and in North America. None of us ever heard any Icelandic folk music. And so we thought, well, if we can find some, then it'll be, you know, a first for us kind of thing. And it wasn't easy, but in the end we luckily found a group of 4 people who were prepared to come and perform, and Bára was one of them. And so when I heard the music, I thought, why isn't this really well known?
Bára, would you say that ornamentation is a very strong feature throughout, or is it very different depending on who the singer is?
Well, in the tradition of rimur, and it used to be lots of ornament, but it's like singers nowadays don't do that so much, not so many of them. But it's also, I remember listening to my grandfather, the way he used the voice was a kind of different than other people around me. And when you listen to old recordings, you can hear other people sing it with that kind of technical. So.
And for those who don't know, could you just maybe explain the concept of rimur and what it is?
Rimur is a plural word. The singular word is rima. So basically it's the Icelandic version of the epic ballad, you might say. So these are big, long stories about heroes, villains, kings, queens, murders, ghosts, dragons, that kind of territory. And they're very, very long, these things. So, 1,000 verses is kind of fairly standard and maybe more. And so being that long, the thing is divided into chapters. So one chapter is rima, the whole sequence of that is rimur. And the other thing about it is that unlike the ballad tradition, say in the British Isles, the different chapters will be in different poetic meters. So like the first rima might be 4 lines in a verse and so many syllables, like in the first line and the third line in a different number, in the second and fourth, and with the rhymes in a certain way. Then the next rima might be in 3 lines with the different number of syllables in a line and so on.
But there are also rimur which are not that long. And are also people use the same poetic form of just a short version of describing the nature or whatever, and might be with just one verse. I can give you one example of little tune and verse which my grandmother used to sing. Konan blessuð kemst á stjá, kærleik meður fínum grautardiskum gengur frá, gætir að hjúum sínum, gætir að hjúum sínum.
Beautiful, thank you. Can you just maybe tell us a little bit about what the story behind that, even that little excerpt of what
Yeah,
you're saying
it's basically about the woman. She's the first one, wakes up in the morning and get the dishes ready, and wakes up her like servant and feed them.
Okay. I just wanted to ask you as well, as a composer myself to another composer, how folk song impacts upon your own composing, because I know that is a very strong part of what you do as well.
I kind of use very different modes in my compositions. I also use a lot of rhythm changes, because that's a lot in these little tunes. And often kind of parallel fifth, that's a kind of also one of the key things in Icelandic traditional music. So I'm definitely influenced by Icelandic traditional music in my compositions.
It's interesting too that parallel fifths come up so much in medieval music.
That's not a rimur, but it's more like a different types of music, which was quite popular in especially 18th and 19th century. Tvísöngur, where the harmony is a kind of traditional, but it goes above the melody and also under. And very many of these tunes are in the Lydian mode. And it's quite often that when the voices meet, it's in an augmented fourth. So maybe the harmony is above, they meet up in this augmented fourth, diabolus in musica, as they call it, and then it goes under the melody.
Actually, I'll go back to you, Chris, about the duo of FUNI. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Because you talked about how you wanted to shine a light on Icelandic folk music and how maybe you felt that a lot of kind of the wide community of musicians or music lovers maybe don't know this music very well. Why do you think that is?
One of the things that's very noticeable is that there is no folk scene here like there has been across the rest of Europe and North America, particularly over the last 50 years or more. That simply hasn't really happened here for whatever reasons. I guess population size could be a part of it. And, you know, we have this society, Kvæðamenn Félagið, that Bára was chair of, and it's 90 years old now, and it's done a fantastic job of keeping stuff together and recording stuff and perpetuating the tradition, but its membership is, you know, relatively small. And I think maybe one reason is because the kind of great gem of the tradition here is this fantastic vocal music tradition, both musically and poetically. And in a lot of other countries, there's always been instrumental dance music that goes along with that. Here, not so much, and not in the same way. And I think maybe that's had something to do with it.
But it was much more of instrumental music in the early 20th century, you know. So people playing polkas and this kind of dances, that was quite common.
Yeah.
And we can see it like when we were at the museum in Ísafjörður with the accordion, all the accordions, then we could see the kind of history of all around the countries. They played accordion and for dances, and that was very common. Yeah,
but then there's a sort of whole thing about the way that romantic nationalism impacts on traditional music.
But I want to say also about other things we talked about earlier, like growing up in a countryside. I forgot to mention the autumn roundup, which is quite important. So when they go up to the mountains to gather together both the sheep and also the horses, you know, people are having fun. It may be, at least it used to take a few days. So people used to sing together in the evenings. And also after gathering all the sheep together and down to the valley, that's when people in the valley, they used to kind of be all together, everybody together doing this. And also, especially after they finished doing it, they were drinking and they used to sing this kind of music.
So song was very much a part of everyday life. I mean, I heard you singing a beautiful work song which was connected to spinning. I'm fascinated with this idea that song is not for performance, but it's just part of ritual and part of everyday life as well.
Yeah, it used to be that much more maybe than now, especially when people were living in the farmhouses, in the torf houses, and you know, lots of people together. They were performing for each other. It was often rimur songs they were performing in the evenings. Often it was maybe the farmer or someone else at the farm who could do it, or a guest who came for a visit and had some new story to tell or sing about. But there are also, of course, women also singing for the children. That was lots of kind of long rhymes they were also singing for them. Bit nonsense. Yeah. But this spinning song, it's a woman singing, and she's singing for the children and telling the children all the work she used to do. And I mean, she's 75 years old, and she have milked the cow, she have gathered the sheep, she have made shoes, she have ground coffee beans, and she have picked up eider down, and she have been like a kind of skipper on a boat, also doing fishing and so on. I mean, women used to do all kinds of work here. I mean, God, they were really working hard.
It's interesting to see how some people I know first came upon the rimur through the group Sigur Rós, and they were connected to Steindór Anderson and things like that. How do you feel about that? Do you think that interpretation is very much not in keeping with the origins of it, or do you think that it's good to see it being brought out into a mainstream
Yeah,
audience.
definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really interesting that what they did. I mean, it was just like a sort of a period where they did some things together, and I think what they did was really, really good. And what we do is we use instrumental accompaniment, not all the time, but we've brought the long spill out of the cupboard and made that a part of what we do. And I use guitar as well. Bára plays cantala, which is not an Icelandic instrument any more than the guitar is. So we kind of do that because that's what we like doing. We always try to kind of do it sort of aware of the kind of queue of people that we're standing at the front of, if you know what I mean.
I see a strand of that here, that it's very respectful yet open to bringing genres together. I mean, I see that in the work that the two of you do together. And is that quite important to you, to feel that these lines can be blurred and you don't have to have boundaries between different genres?
At the end of the day, it's down to, you know, our limitations as musicians. Like, that's the only deciding factor. That and the limitations of our imagination.
I mean, it makes me think a little bit of the tradition of Irish sean-nós singing,
Yeah.
which is very much regarded as being completely a cappella, solo, unaccompanied. But of course, in recent years, you do have singers who are experimenting with electronic accompaniment and with, you know, instrumental, and, you know, I think there is a more of a openness about that now.
But I think one of the good things in a way here, as a spin-off of there being very low levels of awareness about the tradition here, is that we don't have folk police.
Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about this collection. Where did the songs come from and who are the singers?
They are singing these tunes from their area, or they learned from their parents or neighbors or whatever, you know. And actually quite a lot of them come from a place in north of Iceland, in a county called Húnavatnssýsla.
What was the process like of putting this book together in terms of transcribing the tunes? And that must have been a very big undertaking.
Yeah, it was a big job. So what people, basically, it was who wrote down the music by listening to the recordings. I proofread it. And in this book, they are all the verses they were singing. And I think they actually did quite a good job of doing notes, you know, about who was singing and where do the tune come, like here, you know. This is like a drinking song, you know. Flaskan þjála léttir lund lætur tálið dvína við hana raula væna stund vermir sálin mína. He loves the bottle, this guy. And
you notice there's a stylistic thing that you always hold the last note like double fermata length, and you stack them up like plates.
So it's all kinds of. This is about the winter fog here. Þegar vetrar þokan grá þig vitt fjötra inni svífðu burt og sestu hjá sumar gleði minni.
I was just going to say that actually it feels like quite long phrases in a way, like without taking a breath.
Yeah.
So that first section there you really pushed through for a long time. Before, yeah.
I mean, like this one, I take a little breath here, and after the third line, and sometimes it's just like no breath, you know.
One continuous phrase.
Yeah, you know.
So actually, Steindor Anderson did a huge job tracking down the poems that, you know, single verses came from, so that the whole thing could go into the book.
Okay.
That was a big part of what he did.
Here's a very nice one about the autumn.
Oh,
That's it.
That's the one I'm thinking of. It's Haustid Nalgast. Yeah, that's something that I actually set to music before, which is fall approaches about the coming of winter.
Sólin blessuð sigurauð til viðar glóa lofti gulli ský grát klökk áin niðar.
So that one has almost a sense of kind of melancholy about it. And is it because the text is to do with that the darkness is coming?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
But I think there's something hopeful about that text, isn't there? Because it talks about the lights from the sky will look down upon us, the stars. I first heard it with Steindór Anderson, actually.
Yeah. Sólin blessu sigurauð til viðar glóa lofti gullin ský. Grát klökk áin niðar. It's also, I think it's so interesting, it's both major and minor. And the text is quite beautiful, and as you say, it's a kind of, it's about the sunset, and the autumn is coming, and the winter, and the birds are kind of gone away, lowan. Yeah. The darkness is coming, but as you say here are the stars shining. It's like a God's rays, geislar, over the winter sky.
And do you think that's why it's in major and minor, because it's showing sort of hope as well as some melancholy?
Yeah, it could be.
And maybe tell us a little bit about traditionally what these performances would have been like what kind of situation, what kind of scenario would there be that these would be performed in?
Basically, people used to sing these tunes in the farmhouse in the evenings. We call it kvöldvaka. It's a kind of people working, knitting, and spinning rocks. So this was the entertainment. But of course, they were also telling stories. It was also storytelling. But these songs were basically mostly in this environment. And I heard an interview with an old man, and he was saying the singers, they had to have a strong voice, because even though it wasn't a big house, it was so much noise in the rock, and also foul weather outside. So they have to kind of have this strong voice so people could hear the story, the texts of the...
It was kind of radio in the corner music.
Yeah. But there are also stories of people just singing this for the sheep when they are, because in the summers, and they had to kind of go milking the sheep and take care of the sheep.
Til að hefta hungursnauð hef ég þorskaus rifið, strokkað rjóma, bakað brauð, búr og eldhús þrifið.
And that was Bára Grímsdóttir and Chris Foster sharing the story and the sound of Iceland's folk song. And you can see a video clip of our chat with them and Bára singing on our website mothersbloodsistersongs.com. Thanks for listening.
Flattan hef ég fiskin hert, fuglar eitti lengi, skó úr sauðaskinni gert, skafið elta þvengi. Slegið hef ég grasið grænt, gróin varið túnin, æðar kollum eggjum rænt, af þeim hreinsað dún.